You know, Marc, you've been getting a lot of attention recently for your view on the outlook for tech IPOs, or a lack of tech IPOs, which we're not going to talk about how that affects, you know, the bankers who are down the street. That's another story. But are you surprised by the reaction to some of the comments you've sort of made in the last few months on this issue?
I don't know. I think people get emotional about it. I just think it's objective reality. You know, I just keep pointing out the number of public companies in the U.S. in 1997 was 8,800. Today it's 4,100. And so there's a massive collapse in the number of public companies in the U.S. All the vast majority of the interesting activity is now happening on the private side, and that's a huge change.
One of the stories we've been following today is that Microsoft has decided to do a major reorganization, and I was talking to one former CEO who said, you know, every couple of years you have to rearrange the deck chairs, otherwise shareholders are going to get angry. The issue of shareholder pressure, I mean, does that factor into your thinking on this issue? Yeah,
well, so if you're a big company like Microsoft, you have actually a lot of capability to withstand shareholder pressure, and you can do things like reorgs, and that addresses a lot of issues, or whatever else you do. For small companies, you can get into real trouble under certain kinds of shareholder pressure. For example, if you need to raise money, if you're not fully funded, and you come under attack by short sellers, you may never be able to raise money, and your bankruptcy may become a self-fulfilling process. And so it's very, very dangerous to be public unless you're strong and established. We like to say companies need to be a fortress before they go public.
Right. Let's try another tangible example. So the executives at Twitter get asked by people like me and the rest of the media every day, when are you going public? I mean, theoretically, given the fact that they have investors who were, you know, investing in Twitter early on, is that a company that could avoid going public forever, do you think?
I think they could avoid going public for a long time, but I also think they've built themselves into a very powerful company. I think it's a more powerful company than people think, and I think it's a more powerful business than people think. And so I think they can pick their time. I think they can go public whenever they think they're ready.
What do you think is the most powerful thing about the business?
I think the business is working very well. I think the business is working better than, the actual business is working better than people think. And then it's a phenomenon. It's a global phenomenon. It's doing incredibly well. It's growing very fast.
I'm really curious about you personally as somebody who sits on a lot of boards, and I'm sure that works out really well for the business that you're building at Andreessen Horowitz, but at the same time, do you get frustrated? Do you say, oh, maybe I shouldn't sit on a number of boards?
I guess I'm cursed by curiosity. I love building companies. I love building companies, and I love it at all sizes and scales. And so it's really interesting to me. You know, one day I'll be in a board meeting with an entrepreneur, you know, with 4 employees. The next, week it'll be a board meeting Hewlett-Packard, 400,000 employees. And so basically I just get to see the full spectrum of how these companies operate, both large and small.
I was curious to see your partner Ben Horowitz blog recently about the management change at Zynga and how Don Matrick came in, and the structure of Marc Pincus, the founder, reporting to Matrick, and then ultimately Matrick reporting back to Pincus because he's the chairman. One of the, this is another public company issue. Are you on the same page with Ben on that issue?
Oh, I think we have slightly different opinions. I mean, I think I agree with the general principle. There's this concept of 2 in the box, or sort of co-CEOs. Goldman Sachs actually for many years very successfully had co-CEOs, so it actually can be done, but it's a very, very tricky thing because the people have to mesh perfectly. It works really well in cases where people have long established histories and relationships and really understand and trust each other. It can be daunting for a new CEO coming in to not really be the sole person in charge. And so, we certainly wish them the best. We hope it works, but it is a real challenge to make that kind of thing work.
Let's talk about your business as well. I mean, you've built out basically a network, so the portfolio companies can build their businesses in all the areas that they need to grow to be a real player, and potentially, do it while they stay private.
Right.
As you build that out, it almost makes me think about, it's not identical, but the pitch that KKR was making back in the 80s, like, there's a lot of reasons why you don't have to be a public company. Is that part of the pitch that you're making right now? Yeah,
actually KKR is one of the firms that we studied when we started our firm, and we've drawn a lot of inspiration from them. Yeah, we think it's possible for these companies to stay private and to grow and to thrive for a very long time. One of the things is you have more investors like us who will come in later stages. We've invested in companies much later than traditional venture capitalists for companies that we think are going to stay private for longer and that are building very big businesses. And so you've got investors who will actually step in and participate much later than traditional VCs.
And on the investing side, I know when you last joined us at the Milken conference, you're speaking to Will O'Bay about some of your retail investments and what's happening in traditional retail versus the areas where you're investing. You got the Barnes & Noble story. There's a story where they do have a tech attachment through the Nook.
Yeah.
Is the Nook a product that you think can survive?
Yeah, so on an absolute basis, the Nook has been very impressive. It's a very impressive product. Its customers really like it. On a relative basis, the problem they have is they have to compete with Amazon and Google and Apple. And the world's best technology companies like Amazon, Apple, and Google are really, really good at what they do. And it's very hard for somebody from outside the tech industry, I think, to compete with those guys in the long run.
And really quickly before we go, speaking of Google, I know you're a big champion of Google Glass and the opportunities ahead, and you've talked about what it could mean down the road, especially with EMTs. But what is the one thing Marc Andreessen has done with Google Glass so far that you think is really cool?
Oh, yeah, having actually interesting, I have no sense of direction. I have no idea where we are right now. I don't know which way is north. Having actual directions, having maps with you all the time, always knowing where you are and always knowing where to go places in your field of vision, it's amazing. It completely changes your orientation of the world if you have no sense of direction like me.